The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs. Here to help shed some light on the ruling and what it means for Canada is Diamond Isinger, the former special advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau on Canada-U.S. relations. Diamond, thanks as always for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Initial reaction to the ruling, is it what you expected or are you surprised?
Yeah, this is such a big deal, both for the United States domestically and for partners all around the world. Trump has made tariffs so central and essential to his agenda in the second administration. And it's particularly meaningful timing. We've been waiting for this decision, of course, for a number of months, unsure which specific day it was going to break on, but right ahead of the State of the Union address on Tuesday, where Trump is to be setting out major priorities for the year ahead. I can't imagine that tariffs won't be a dominant theme of that as he tries to pivot to new ways to still collect revenue from countries around the world.
For the timing on this, I mean, do you think that was the reason, was before the State of the Union, or this is just the court being the court?
Yeah, this is just the court being the court. We've been waiting for these decision days that are regularly scheduled. This is the first one after a recent multi-week hiatus or break that the Supreme Court had. So we were expecting this news today or in ensuing decision days. They've been deliberating over this, but the decision was also fairly definitive, not unanimous, but I think 6-3 in favor of striking down these tariffs. So they took the time to evaluate the information. They heard from the parties to the case, and they've made this announcement today.
I accidentally printed the ruling. It is not. It's not a thin. This is the ruling here. I think I'm going to hurt my back. That is the ruling there. I printed it by accident. I think it was a few pages. So they did take their time with this. What does this mean when it comes to negotiations? How does Canada handle this? What do they do with this?
Yeah, in some ways, I feel like today's news is positive for Canada, but in a mixed sense. It's hard to ever determine what developments with the U.S. exactly are going to mean until we see what actually unfolds. But it is in some ways very positive that Canada has not yet entered into an agreement with the U.S. or not made major concessions in hopes of relief, for example, from these tariffs. We've now seen the legality of them determined to be illegal. They're being struck down. Of course, it's very possible that Trump pivots to new mechanisms, again, to be imposing tariffs. But Canada is much better positioned and situated compared to many partners around the world, both because of the protections that CUSMA has afforded even amid this ambiguity, and also because we didn't rush to a bad deal and instead have been waiting and holding out as part of conversations to get to a CUSMA process.
And now I believe there's about 5 different options that Trump could use to kind of bring back these tariffs at varying levels. What would change his mind about bringing them back? Is there anything in the U.S. that might change his mind about bringing them back?
Yeah, domestic political pressure potentially, but he doesn't seem to be chastened by that so far. There has definitely been a broad-based, multi-partisan understanding in the United States that tariffs are a net negative for the American people. While the president has represented them as a source of funds, it's actually Americans themselves who are paying for these tariffs in so many cases, directly in the cost of everyday goods that they require in their life. And so that could be, as we head towards political milestones in the United States, midterm elections, et cetera, that could be something where he feels some pressure to pivot away. But we're not seeing that yet. And I have to say that the history with President Trump is such that typically when he gets his wrist slapped or he is told that he can't do something, he doesn't generally take that lightly and step away from the plan that he had. He tries to reinvent that plan and find a different way to proceed.
Yeah, and then we have seen some cracks. We've seen some Republicans in the House side with the Democrats, but probably not enough to convince Trump on this. Is there that danger that he may come back with something worse?
Absolutely. And we are having so many different intersecting and co-located issues right now. We have not just on tariffs, keeping in mind that this is but one category of tariffs that have been struck down today. We still have the Section 232 tariffs that are in place on some key Canadian sectors that will continue to wreak havoc there, sectors that were already under tremendous economic pressures independent of tariffs, labor realities, et cetera. So for them to still be facing these tariffs is challenging. It's possible, for example, and who knows as we forecast the possible actions of the president, but he could increase those tariffs further. He could use other mechanisms to insert new tariffs into the situation. I think that Canadian businesses are potentially at significant risk, and that's where the Canadian government can play a key role in the weeks and months ahead of trying to get to this clearer agreement on CUSMA in hopes that that overarching agreement helps eliminate some of these side tariff issues.
And is there anything the government can do before then, or are companies going to have to kind of grin and bear it and eat these eat any potential tariffs until we have a new deal?
Yeah, the government of Canada has already been doing a variety of actions. They've been providing industry supports. They've been engaging with stakeholders to hear from them about what they need in the interim to try to mitigate some of these impacts. We've seen, for example, in major project announcements, lots of moves to use Canadian steel and aluminum in our domestic projects while they're facing these tremendous tariff pressures from the United States. So I expect more of that in the time ahead, but I think what the government of Canada does will entirely depend, of course, on the nature of the next steps from the United States.
I was going to say, what kind of an impact does this have on the CUSMA negotiations? But they're so far away in the future. I mean, they're nearly, 4 months away. So much could happen before then. This is hardly the last thing before we get to the real talks about it. Where do you see them going if this holds? And where do you see the talks going with this ruling?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. Are they a while away? The July 1st deadline, as it's being characterized, is a little bit of a confusing one for the general public and for people who follow this closely. July 1st, depending on who you ask and what country is interpreting things in what ways, is either the deadline to have resolved the situation or the deadline to decide what we do next. So what the process could be next. For example, opening formal talks between the three countries. So it's not clear where exactly we're at in this process. And even July 1st is a little bit of an arbitrary deadline. It's spelled out in the agreement, but that's not to say that things couldn't change, especially with the unpredictable reality of working with President Trump. So I expect this will still be a live issue, but the Canadian government has also been prudent to focus on interactions with emerging markets around the world, with other like-minded countries. For example, coming out of the Prime Minister's remarks at Davos about bringing together middle powers. So they'll be well served to keep focusing on that on a dual track while they also are having potential conversations with the U.S. and Mexico.
Okay, we have to wrap it up there, but Diamond, thank you as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Diamond Isinger is the former special advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau on Canada-U.S. relations.